So without further ado, I'm going to turn over the microphone to our illustrious MC, Roy Fox, also known as Roy the Fox, and his friends just call him The. But we had the great pleasure of meeting Roy Fox when we had our Queens Historic Bus Tour, and we landed at the Rufus King Manor, where Roy Fox is the caretaker and lecturer there, and his presentation about Rufus King, Senator Rufus King, one of the great founding fathers, literally knocked our socks off. So I'm going to welcome to our podium, also a radio broadcaster for 30 years, Roy the Fox.
Woo! Let's hear it, folks. Come on. Hi. How am I? How are you? The baskets, we're supposed to talk about that a million times. 18 baskets over there. They're selling the raffle tickets. Also, King Manor material at the door over there. Please help yourself to that. I appreciate it. Anyone taking photos for social media, please use the hashtag QVGOP. I have no idea what I just said, but I said it anyway, and I'm happy. I've been asked to start us out by dealing with beginnings. The beginning of the Republican Party, GOP, grand old party, GOP, government of the people. The beginning of the Lincoln legacy. The beginning of freedom for one and all. I've been asked to start this because as caretaker of the Rufus King Museum, I can do this with no trouble at all. King Manor, as was mentioned, was the home of Rufus King. Not just the founding father of the United States and the signer of the Constitution, he is one of the 5 framers of that Constitution. After 4 months in Philadelphia, how to put pieces together in creating a viable document. The Committee of Style and Arrangement comprised Governor Morris, William Samuel Johnson, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and Rufus King, the writers of the United States Constitution. For those keeping track of an amazing show on Broadway, and a brilliant production at that, Hamilton, you know of the importance of Alexander Hamilton. One of the best of our current historians, Gordon Wood, has called Hamilton, and correctly so, the genius among the founders. Hamilton was responsible for Rufus King becoming New York's first United States Senator. Hamilton was also godfather to the 2 oldest boys of Rufus King, and the oldest one, John Alsop King, was one of the founding fathers of the Republican Party. His father, Rufus, was a Federalist, which in turn became the National Republicans, which then became the Whigs, and finally, the creation of the Republican Party, the result of the disastrous Kansas-Nebraska action in 1854. There were others creating the Republican Party, but here in New York, along with John Alsop King and additional friends, there was William Seward. What an interesting statesman. U.S. Senator, Governor of New York, a determined opponent of the spread of slavery. It was assumed he would be the President of the United States in 1860. But the guy from Springfield, Illinois, trounced him, then turned around and asked Seward to become his Secretary of State. That has happened only one time since. If you have never visited his home in Auburn, New York, do it. Earlier, the Republicans had failed in an attempt to place a candidate into the White House. 1856. John Charles Fremont, the Pathfinder, ran and lost. But in that election of 1856, here in New York, John Alsop King ran for the office of governor, and he won. This is 19 years before the Queens Village Republican Club has been organized. Rufus's oldest kid is the first Republican governor of New York. King Manor was called the governor's house for decades afterwards. He is the only one, aside from Mario Cuomo, to come from Jamaica, Queens, and serve as governor. And add the current governor to the mix, they are the only 3 governors to come from Queens. It was a 2-year term, 1857 to 59. What was called the Blackbirders would come from the South. They would grab the free African Americans in New York, take them south, and sell them into slavery. Governor King went after these hoodlums, brought them back to New York, on trial, into the Hooskow, and then with monies available, a public proclamation to bring back to New York our free citizens. John learned well how to live, following the example of his parents, Rufus and Mary King. Before becoming governor, he had represented us in the Congress. When the foolish compromise of 1850 came up on the House floor, again selling out to the South in slavery, John Alsop King, walking in his father's footsteps, stood up in the House of Representatives and let the minority report be heard. New Yorkers, he said, are free men, and the liberty they enjoy, they would transmit to their children. It is the settled, calm, and deliberate conviction and judgment of the vast majority of the people of that state that the soil of freedom should never by their vote or act become the resting place of slavery. Man, that's good stuff. That's the way our public leaders used to talk. A little later on, I have one more addition to that in line with Black History Month. All right, let's get to what we're really interested in talking about. You're all talking about Donald Trump. I have my Donald Trump story. Back in the last century, I did an afternoon radio show on the old WMCA. Ken Fairchild and Bob Grant and Barry Farber and Barry Gray. Oh, the nights drinking with Gray at Neary's at 57th and 1st. Long John Neville, I used to tell John, I don't even care if the stories are true, just keep them coming on. I had the opportunity of Donald Trump being on the air with me for 1 hour. My wife, who has since had the good sense to leave me, but I digress, she was the producer of the show, and when the hour was over, we're talking in the studio, Mary comes in, and when it's all over, we shake hands, and he says, Fox, if I can ever do anything for you, I want you to feel free to call me. I said, Donald, I want you to feel free to do the same thing. Mary and I went out drinking, and she says, Fox, as long as I live, I will never understand you. You actually told Donald Trump that if he ever needed, I said, you never know. So the other day, Mary and I are talking. I said, you know, the funny thing is, he never called me. She said, no, Fox, the funny thing is, you never called him. And then she paused and said, you know, if you had called him, it may have saved our marriage. That's funny. I thought that's the reason I didn't make the call. This is from Mort Saul. We've gone from Presidents Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and John Quincy Adams, to Tricky Dicky Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, father-son Bushes, Obama, and the current candidates. Do you know what that proves? Darwin was wrong. Listen, you can laugh now and figure it out on the bus on the way home. That way, even if you still don't figure it out, you've had a nice bus ride for once. Let me try another one. With our man, Donald Turner, we now have Sarah Palin back in the action. Do you know why we call Justice Sotomayor the Sarah Palin of the East Coast? Because from her New York apartment, she claims she can see the Russian tea room. I'm giving you one more shot and that's it, folks. Woman comes on the airplane to Logan Airport, lands at the airport, gets out through the terminal, outside, into the cab, into the back seat, and she says, "I've come to Boston to get scrod." Without missing a beat, the cabbie says, "Gee, that's the first time I've ever heard it in the blue perfect subjunctive." All right. Now to see how many, he got it, little late, little slow, got it. Let's see how many names I can mispronounce of the folks that I'm supposed to give credit to right now. Don't take it personally, I just don't know what I'm doing. The folks that are here that we appreciate, well, that's all of you, of course. But Marvin Jeffcoat is the Queens Republican candidate for the New York State Senate and past commander of Queens County VFW. Here? Right here, I heard. Okay. Ambassador of the Republic of Georgia, and boy, is there a country that lives in a troubled neighborhood. Ambassador of the Republic of Georgia to the United Nations, and I hope I do somewhat justice here, Honorable Kanha Almadza. Is that close? Also, the Consul General for the Republic of Georgia, Honorable Diana DeGenti. Diana, where are you? You're as good looking as when you walked in the door, and I'm not supposed to say stuff like that anymore. But among other things, that lady is fluent in English, Russian, and Georgian, and holds a diplomatic rank of Envoy Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary. And I told you, Diana, I would add to that. In addition to what you are, my calling card, King Manor Museum, Roy Fox, Minister Plenipotentiary. Well, when President Washington sent Rufus King to heal the wounds left over from the Revolutionary War, he was not an ambassador, he was a minister plenipotentiary. So Diana, Envoy Extraordinaire and Plenipotentiary, and Fox, Minister Plenipotentiary. What are we doing with these peons? I mean, it's great to have you here today. Oh yeah, here's another tough one. This is Pervez Paul, I hope I do this right, Rafiq, former member of parliament, oh man, another troubled neighborhood, Punjab, Pakistan, and executive director of Leading for Belief. Grant Lawley, former Republican congressional candidate. Grant? Not here? Okay. Saves us a little time. Kathy Donahoe, Bridge to Life president. Woo! Bart Haggerty, deputy chief clerk of Queens County Board of Elections. Rosemary Sarah, president of the Nassau County Federation of Republican Women. Whoa! William Malin, Human Rights Commissioner, Nassau County. And it says here, our own Frank Padovan.
Hey, Frank.
Yeah, he's over there. As caretaker of King Manor for 26 years and working out at the county farm and busy in this community, for all of you folks that are here, you gotta know what tremendous service Frank Padovan. Would you, on my behalf, give him an extra special round of applause? Frank, thank you for everything. The best. Alan Zorn, Rockaway Republican Club president. Watch out, you folks in the Rockaways. The Times did a thing the other day about the up-and-coming neighborhoods. You're on that list. Trouble ahead, and it's a great area. Liam McCabe, Brooklyn South Conservative Party Club president. Liam. Juan Pablo Andrade, former Republican candidate for Suffolk County Legislature. Boy, do I remember, Rudy, when you were a busy guy. Former Deputy Mayor Rudy Washington. Mike Conigliaro, Queens Republican candidate for New York State Senate and Executive Director of Queens County Republican Party. David Gerfine and Philip Pideau, I hope I got that right, because they are both running as Republican candidates for Congress. Did I do that all right? Where? John, the cat man. Is he here? Not yet. He's not here yet? Okay. Well, you know the cat man, and former Republican candidate for mayor, and I will tell you, he does a radio show on the weekends, and I think the license to the radio station is New Jersey. And it's a very small station, and yet every morning on Monday, NPR, I hear the cat man interviewing somebody of great importance in a terrific interview. So he is for sure serving us in the public interest. Okay, and Chuck, whoop, one more. When we talk about last minute stuff, listen, I can't pronounce the ones I had written ahead of time. Frank Sartoro, Republican congressional candidate. Here. And New York City Councilman Eric Ulrich, I'm sorry. You not only talk bad, you write even worse. The cat man is here, John Cassie, but John, I'm a radio broadcaster and I never get your name right. Katsamadides. Close enough for Jazz. Where is he? And John, I mentioned earlier that I always know who your guests are, if not listening to your program Monday morning on NPR. They're always picking something up. You're doing a grand and glorious job. Some folks have asked me a little bit about my background. I just want you to know that I was a radio broadcaster for 30 years, caretaker of King Manor for 26 years. You're looking at a 76-year-old human being who has never worked a legitimate day in his life, and we're going to keep it that way. I told you there would be a part 2 about the Rufus King story, and please help yourself to the material. I want you to open your Columbia encyclopedias to page wait a second. Phil, you didn't tell them to bring their Columbia encyclopedias?
Oops.
That's the end. Good night, folks. Turn to page 1478. Correction. No, that's it. Page 1478. This is for Black History Month. On page 1478, I want you to notice, right-hand side, the top listing. It says, Martin Luther Jr. Starts out King Martin Luther Jr. You know, among other things, he led the boycott 55-56 by Montgomery blacks against the segregated city bus lines that attained national prominence, and you know all of that. But I want you to notice the very next listing, Columbia Encyclopedia, page 1478. King Rufus. He helped draft the Ordinance of 1787 and was chiefly responsible for the exclusion of slavery from the Northwest Territory. Why is it we know the one name in the Columbia Encyclopedia and his importance and not the other? And the other is a next door neighbor. The same year as the Constitution was written in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress in New York voted the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, called the third most important document next to the Declaration, the Constitution, the Northwest Ordinance, because the Northwest Ordinance, beginning in 1803, was comprised of 5 states, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin, that were brought into a nation of slavery as free states, and they stayed that way because of the ban that was put there by Rufus King. One more thing. There are 2 buildings on the campus of Queens College that are tributes to founding fathers. There is the Jefferson Building, and there is Rufus King Hall. Both are necessary to tell the story. The one, a dreamer who couldn't bring himself to fulfill the hopes he put on paper. The other, determined to make of those dreams a reality. When Abraham Lincoln was making his bid for the presidency, he didn't look to Washington or Jefferson to serve as an example of what he had in mind for the future of this nation. In his crucial presentation here in New York at the Cooper Union, the auditorium is still there, the die is still there, the thing that Lincoln stood behind is still there, and Rufus King's son, John Quincy Adams, was on that die because of being one of the founding fathers of the Republican Party. Mr. Lincoln used as an illustration of those doing it right from the get-go Senator Rufus King, who, quote, steadily voted for slavery prohibition and against all compromises. By this, Mr. King showed that in his understanding, no line dividing local from federal authority, not anything in the Constitution was violated by Congress prohibiting slavery in federal territory. I go out to do speaking engagements. If you have a group, or if you know of a group that's looking for a great speaker, level with them. Be honest with them. Tell them they can't afford a great speaker, but Fox is available. What are you laughing about? I don't charge because of what I have to say is so important. I don't want to get it lost behind dollars and cents. If there is a fee that they pay for a speaker, it goes to King Manor. And the other thing is, please come and see me. Now back to whatever you guys wanted to talk about. So two women end up sitting next to one another in the airplane. One woman's a Brooklynite. She decides she's going to be friendly, so she says, so where are you from? The woman sitting next to her said, I come from an area in which we don't end our sentences with a preposition. Brooklynite sits back and thinks about this, decides to give it a second try. So, where are you from, bitch? You know, the challenge he gave you, I wonder if you realize that next year is the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther's putting the 95 Theses on the church door in Wittenberg. And to celebrate, and that's the word, the Pope will be at the Lutheran Cathedral in Sweden. What a momentous time that can be for the church. And it was Luther that said, you are a little Christ, and if you don't see in the little Christ the big Christ, your faith is a sham and a phony. Powerful stuff. It was Bill King, a Southern Baptist, who was inspired by Luther and decided to change his name and the name of his son to Martin Luther King Sr. and Martin Luther King Jr. You were talking a lot today about the times and the difficulties and where we go from here and how we get into these situations. I give you from the New Yorker the wit of James Thurber. You can fool too many of the people too much of the time. Now.